Hey, welcome to another episode of This Pharaoh Live. Today's episode is going to be hydroponics, right?
Yep, hydroponics.
Yeah. That's some fun stuff. Beginning this little thing off, we have some crazy news, guys. Guess what? We finally closed. Yes.
It's been a long journey, but we made it. We did it.
6 months. 6 months
in the making.
6 months.
Totally worth it. Totally worth it.
Yeah, that's not including like the last 2 years of actually looking at properties.
Yeah, maybe I would 3.
Maybe 3.
Years? Okay,
yeah.
so we've always had this plan and this vision of what we wanted to do and how important a farm was for us to teach our daughter, how to self-sustain. And so that has been the forefront of like us pushing really hard to getting our farm started, amongst other things, right? But
the zombie apocalypse.
Definitely the main component was our daughter. So we're super excited. So today's a very special day.
Yeah. So yeah, we I came from a farming background and like a self-reliance background. She found me
in the wild.
Yeah, she found me in the wilderness.
I domesticated him.
Partially.
Didn't work out because now we're headed back to the farm.
Yeah. My nature wins out. So, we've been looking for about pretty seriously for about 2 years. And we'd find a place and then things just wouldn't line up. Or, what was that one? We found a place and we liked it. And it turned out not to have a septic system.
Yeah. Or an illegal septic system.
Well, no, it just didn't have, that one didn't have one. The one in Orange Grove?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it just didn't have one. There was no evidence ever of a septic being on that property ever. It was a very nice house. They remodeled the house. But we had it was kind of fishy, and we were like, let's just go ahead and have it inspected. And they were like, why would you want an inspection? Inspections are silly. It's just gonna slow down the buying process. Had it inspected, and the inspector was like, we can't even find records that there ever was a septic system. The county has no record that there is a septic system assigned to this property, and no one knows if there is a septic system.
Basically, they told us if we were going to if we would move forward with purchasing the property, they were not going to turn on the utilities for us. Which was a big deal breaker for us.
Great, they let us close. They let us buy the property, but then we would have to do the soil reclamation for what was basically a cesspit, haul off that soil, bring new soil in, and then have a county-approved septic system installed.
Not happening.
And we did the math, and we're like, wow, that was an extra $30,000, $40,000 on top of the loan. So it was a stupid deal. And then
crushed my hopes and dreams. So we went back to the drawing board.
It hurt.
And now we have purchased land, and it will be a new home build. So with warranties and all that good stuff, but our own land to do is what we please, and then start our hobby farm.
Yeah. Super excited. Super pumped. It's like I said, man, it's just, I don't know if it's how the rules and regulations are today, but it's becoming hard to buy a house. I was under the impression it should be about as easy as buying a car.
Nope.
Hey, if your credit score is good and you have a down payment and you have many years of being a responsible adult and paying your bills on time, and you have your debt to income ratio is good, it should be like buying a car. Am I wrong? It should be pretty easy, right? You should be able to go okay, well, that's the one I want, and get it inspected. You should be able to go look at a house on a freaking Monday, close on it on a Wednesday, and move in on a Saturday. That's just how I feel. It should be much more difficult than buying a car. Because somebody could buy a car and take it somewhere and chop it up and then use a fake name, right? How is this not going to move? It's going to stay there.
Granted, it was a lot. It was a lot lengthier purchasing land and then purchasing a home because you have to go through 2 different.
There was a
lenders, and it was just kind of. It was just double the pain. So we really felt it, but we're excited. So yay us!
Yay! That was my rant anyway. When I become emperor, I'm changing the rules.
Thanos will snap.
Yeah.
My Thanos snap. Buy a house as easy as it is to get a car.
Yeah. My Thanos snap won't be taking out anybody. They'll be just changing stupid rules.
Yeah. And don't be discouraged, guys. You can still purchase a house in the city. It's relatively easy if you're going through a new builder So my
I
family
think
members
most
have
of our
purchased houses
listeners are
pretty
probably
quickly.
interested in that.
But no, yeah, but we have our listeners that live in the suburbs and still want to do their urban farming, which is completely fine. You'll still have the ability to self-sustain. You don't need that big of a garden to provide vegetation for your own home. But my husband here is like go big or go home always. He's just exaggerated.
Always.
He's so extra. He is so extra. So city house or city backyard would not have worked for
or
him,
you could do like what we eventually plan on doing is we're going to use this house and this land as our like home base, right? But we do want more, so we're going to buy some like totally feral land that has like nothing on it, and that is going to be doesn't have any like amenities. It's just raw land, and then we'll put like our pigs and cattle out there. So we'll buy it within like a 20-30 minute drive of the house,
right?
In a cheaper area. So we'll have like a split farm type thing where we're doing all of our vegetables or orchard, everything like that, and then like our regular like home critters or everything we've talked about: our fish, our quail, bunnies, chickens, random 4-H animals for the beast, our daughter, the tiniest, and then
definitely bees for me. I want to start beekeeping.
But then we'll move all of the big smelly critters and we'll put them out there on some good pasture land somewhere, with the ability to rotate crops and rotate them through fields. So we're going to do kind of like a hybrid system there. And once we get to that point, we're definitely going to talk about it and like rotational grazing and everything else.
That'll probably be our next episode.
Rotational grazing?
Yeah.
Yeah, rotational grazing is really, really awesome. Works really, really well. So let's talk about hydroponics, what everybody's came here for. Hydroponics is not as difficult as everybody makes it out to seem. If you start Googling hydroponics, a whole bunch of weed growers are going to pop up. That's just those guys pioneered basically hydroponics, right? The modern hydroponics was invented pretty much and perfected by the guys growing illegal substances.
And if you try to go to a store, I'm going to forewarn you. If you go to a store and you try to ask somebody about hydroponic setups, they're going to give you a cross look and just look at you up and down and be like, "Oh, I know what you're growing."
Yeah, especially if you've got like a beard and long hair like me.
That wasn't the case for us, though. We were like, "No, really, we want to grow tomatoes and peppers."
We're like, tomatoes, wink, wink,
wink,
wink.
Yeah.
Here's what you need. Yeah, and we're like, no, literally,
no, really,
just tomatoes and peppers. So they were completely unhelpful. Like, what was nice to get there was the Hydrotron, which is like an expanded clay pellet because it's expensive to ship. It's not heavy. They have little clay pellets about the size of a marble. And the picture of those will be in or show like Avatar. But those are really expensive to ship because they're just bulky. Right, so if you can get those locally, that'd work great. Another like substrate like gravel, pea gravel, like washed pea gravel works. Mm-hmm. It's just heavy, or lava rock. I've seen people use lava rock. I've seen people use perlite, but my worry with that is it blow away in the wind.
Yeah,
it's so light.
So talk to our listeners about the whole entire setup and why they would need perlite or.
So this is like this feral setup, right? It doesn't really exist anywhere outside of here. I've never seen anybody else do a system like this. There's a couple of guys I'd like to give a shout out to. There's MHP Gardener. He's on YouTube. It stands for Mobile Home Park Gardener. And the guy had a huge mobile home park, and he would grow vegetables for everybody that lived in the mobile home park, right? And he had a huge Dutch bucket system. And how a Dutch bucket system works is so you have these buckets up off of the ground on a stand that he built like a shelf, right, made out of cinder blocks. And there would be a flood and a drain kind of system. You would flood it with a whole bunch of water, and then it would hit a siphon. The siphon drains everything back out. What's called a bell siphon. And a bell siphon is super easy to make, guys. Imagine a smaller diameter pipe inside of a larger diameter pipe. And the cap is on the large diameter pipe, right? So once the water level raises to where it's going to start going through the small diameter pipe that causes suction, and it will suck down to wherever the bottom of the large diameter pipe is resting. So if you've rested that just off of the ground somewhere, like inside the bucket, just like a quarter of an inch, it's going to suck all the water out to a quarter of an inch. So what he would do is he had everything on a timer, and his water would come on with all the nutrients, and he was growing in buckets of perlite. So he wasn't using a net basket or anything. And it would just flood and drain and flood and drain. He'd do that, 6 or 7 times a day. I was like, that seems cool, but I will mess that up somehow, right? And I wanted to do it outside. He had a really neat setup with a greenhouse. And I was just thinking that, man, if I had that outside, the squirrels would dig in it, or the wind would blow, and I'd end up with white popcorn-looking stuff all over the yard. So I was like, but I really like the buckets. I didn't want to have to buy anything weird. And then so I looked at deep water culture. And what deep water culture is where they just have, it's literally exactly as it sounds. They just get these big bins, they fill them full of water, and they put a bubbler in there, and then add nutrients to the water, and then drop in their floating, like a piece of styrofoam is usually, a piece of wood can sometimes be used. And then they just drop in the little basket. It's called a net cup inside of the floating doodad, and the roots just grow down in the deep water, and they're good to go. They get plenty of oxygen from the dissolved oxygen from the bubbler. So that's deep water culture. I really like the idea of deep water culture because you weren't really worried about, it's really hot in Texas, and we were worried about, what would happen if we get like one of those 105-degree days? We don't want those roots exposed all the time. They're going to dry out in a heartbeat, and it'd be really, really bad. But then at the same time, I was like, man, if that bubbler ever goes out because there was like a power outage or something like that, they're going to drown like real quick and turn slimy real fast. So I was like, well, deep water culture is not for me. And then there was the Kratky system, which a Kratky system is a still water system. There's no bubble or anything involved in it. They take basically trash cans, Rubbermaid trash cans, big containers, because you don't add anything to a Kratky system. At a Kratky system, what you do is you measure out your nutrients and everything beforehand, bring it to a certain percentage of nutrients based on the volume of water that it holds. So if you have say, and I'm not doing the math, I'm just giving you an example. Let's say you have a 25-gallon container. Then you're going to put 3 pepper plants in. You would do the math and go, okay, I need to add 2.5 pounds of this fertilizer to that container. You'd add it to the container, stir it up a little, then leave it alone. You don't even need to worry about it getting 100% dissolved because it's okay to have a gradient where there's more fertilizer down at the bottom than there is at the top. You put your plants in there and then just completely forget about them. As they drink the water, they're going to create their own air gap. And you don't add any water to this system at all. It's a set it and forget it, and it works really well in temperate climates. I don't think it works so well in ours because evaporation happens, right? But people do have a lot of success with it. I have some of the largest, most insane pepper, I'm going to call them trees, because they don't look like a pepper plant. I've seen have been grown in a Kratky system. There's one guy who grew this habanero, and we're talking, it was just sitting in a 25-gallon trash can, just like one of those gray Rubbermaid trash cans, just by his back porch. And it was up to the second-story window. He was leaning out a second-story window, just picking habaneros. It was huge. He was so big, he had to use ratchet straps and tie it to the ground because the wind would blow it over. It looked like a shrub. I was like, man, that's amazing. I didn't like the Kratky system only because I thought that, man, the evaporation would be really crazy. You can't add water to it. If you add water to it, you drown the roots, because roots grow in basically 3 different ways. They grow, we're used to having a lot of air, and we can air gap, and they grow super fine root hairs, and they breathe that way. Or they grow underground, where they're not exposed to a whole bunch of oxygen, kind of in a semi-anoxic environment, and they grow a little bit different that way. And then they grow in the water, where they're just drinking up a bunch of water, and they don't have a lot of little like super fine hairs. They'll have kind of a thicker hair on them, and that's what they do. You can't take roots from one place and put them somewhere else, or they die. That's why as it grows, the root structure changes and is replaced in a cracky system. So, so I didn't like that cracky system because, like, what if it rained? We had a big rainstorm and it flooded. So we kind of came up with, well, I drank like 6 beer.
He measures everything in beers.
Yeah. So I took about 6 beer to come up with what I did. So I got a bunch of Home Depot buckets and set them down. And then, like the O in the Home Depot, I took a 1-inch saw, like a hole saw, popped a hole in there, and then put a 1/2-inch grommet into it. Now, these grommets are just rubber, like donuts that have a little slit in them that fits in the inside of the bucket, and then you can put a 1/2-inch piece of PVC through that hole, and it creates a watertight seal. Right there, if you're looking for them to go through, bring a piece of PVC through something, what you're looking for are grommets, or rubber grommets. And I tried to describe to the Grainger guys and the Home Depot guys and everybody in the world what I was looking to. I want to pass a piece of pipe through a bucket. I want it to be watertight. And they're like, well, I mean, you can use a bulkhead connector and da-da-da-da, and it was all really, really expensive. Or one guy was like, oh, just get some plastic welding stuff. Here's how to do it. And some plastic and caulking. I was like, no, there's got to be a way. And so finally it was actually the local hydroponics store who wink, nod, nudged me and was like, yeah, special tomatoes, right? No, but they were the guys who told me that it was called a rubber grommet. Now they wanted like $4 a piece for them. I went to Grainger. I left directly from there, went directly to Grainger and was like, I need rubber grommets. I want them to fit in a 1-inch hole and have a 1/2-inch hole in the middle. And they went, typed on it. They're like, oh, yeah, sure. They're 72 cents a piece. I was like, I'll take 20. And I walked out with them for under $20. Love them. They resist like your air rot, your critters, erosions, the sun rot, everything, man. They're great. They're fantastic. They are a pain in the freaking butt to get into the bucket. They have to fit super, super, super tight. So use a lot of Vaseline. Like really lube them up. Like go at it like you're like, you really have to use a lot. And then I'm going to give you another tip there is that before you try to force that piece of that's flattened into the PVC through that grommet is take a file or a sander or a belt sander, whatever you have, and just put a little bevel on it, right? The chamfer it. If anybody here is like into reloading, chamfer it, like give it a little bit of a square off. Just go around the front of it and knock down that flat edge to where it's more of a little slope, and it'll slide right in there, slick as heck, and you're good to go. So, and then I had initially done it at the O on the Home Depot so that I had about 1.5 gallons of water that would always stay in the bottom of the bucket, right? Then I had my pipe straight through the bucket, and I was like, man, as it's draining, it's going to pick up a bunch of roots. And they're going to grow down the line and make a mess. So I took a 90 and popped it on the end and faced it straight down. So in order for roots to grow into your water line, they would have to go straight up. They'd have to grow straight up and get into that 90 and then grow down your thing. So not much of a problem with those at all. Now it was about a foot section that fit through the bucket, 90 on one side, 90 on the other, about a 10-inch section underneath that would go down into a 4-inch diameter PVC pipe. And I took that same 1-inch hole, hole saw, and just went down the line and punched a bunch of holes. And so I took all the buckets. We did 12 of them. 12 of them. Yeah, this is an experiment. I put them up on top of on top of a 2x10. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2x10, and up on top of some cinder blocks. So it was 3 cinder blocks high, just laying on the sides, a 2x10 across the top of it. And then those buckets, 12 of them fit perfectly on a 10-foot section of, the 2x10. And then the end would just stick out, fit inside of that 4-inch return. And I had it plugged off on one end and then just used a piece of strap, like metal strap, and just gave it a little bit of an elevation at the far end so it would drain all the way back into our tote. We just used one of those yellow top, black Rubbermaid totes you can buy it. I think we got it at Home Depot? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like, I guess it was like a 50-gallon type one. When we do this again in the future, we will use a much larger tote. Because on hot days, like 104, 105 degree temperature, you're going to go through that tote of water about every 3 days. I'd like to use a much larger tote this time. We're going to do a much, much bigger system. So we have our little system up. We have a return up. It's going to go back into a hole that you've cut in the top of your water reservoir. Just pop a 45 or a 90 at the end. Now, all this is press fit together. I did not glue anything because I wanted to be able to break it down and take it with us when we move. So we've got our buckets. Our buckets are now we got some of those 5-gallon net pots, bucket lids. They're 5-gallon bucket lids with a net pot inside of them. When I say net pot, you think maybe it's made of fabric. It's not. It's made of hard plastic that just looks like a laundry basket, right? It's like a laundry basket that fits on top of a 5-gallon bucket. They're made exclusively for the hydroponic community, the aquaponic community, things like that. They work super, super well. They fit on the round buckets, or you can get some for the square buckets. I like round buckets because you don't ever have that one flat face that's always facing the sun. Now, one thing that we did do with the little Feral Hydroponics setup here is that I took aluminum foil and we went around the whole thing, right? And the reason that we did that was
deflect some of the heat,
but also primarily light. I wanted to keep all the algae out of the bucket, right? Even though those Home Depot buckets are, some of them are red, some of them are orange. They'd still let enough light through, especially if you're doing high nutrition, stuff, that you could end up with some algae growing on the inside of your bucket, which is stealing your nutrition from your plants and can eventually release chemicals that will compete directly with your plants and hurt your plants. So I wanted to make sure that they were just completely blacked out. So inside those net buckets, what we did was we went to Home Depot again, right? Mm-hmm. We picked up some of the plants from Home Depot. We picked up some of the plants from a local nursery.
Amazon.
We just picked up plants, right? Just regular old plant starts. And then we took a bucket of water. We used a tote of water. Just took the plant out of the pot, dropped it in the water. And then left it in there for, I don't know, a beer. I measured time in beers. Maybe it was 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever. Just so that the water got a really good time to get into that soil and make it super soft. And then I just took the garden hose would put my thumb over it while it was under the water and just rinsed off as much of the soil as I could off of that plant's roots. Mm-hmm. Then I take the plant and just quickly lift it out of the water and trying to make sure that there's very little soil, very little detritus, anything holding onto there. Then we put the soil, the plant inside of the empty net pot, and then pile your substrate, which can be, once again, Hydrotron, which is an expanded clay pellet. That's my personal favorite. It's lightweight. It's easy to deal with. Or like lava rock or your perlite or whatever you wish. And then put it in there around your plant to hold it up. And then if you've gotten really leggy starts or large starts, you probably want to clip them to something, whether it's a post, whether you've already put up a piece of cattle like panel behind your little hydroponic setup so that your plants can vine on it. That's what I would suggest you do. I would suggest that you put up a couple of T-posts behind this setup, a couple of pieces of cattle panel, and go make it a lot taller than you think it needs to be. You can either go straight vertical, or I would curve them and grow it so that you can walk underneath the tunnel and then pick all your plants. Because these are going to get huge, unbelievably big.
They grew so well. They grew so large that they were literally leaning over. And it was a problem because there was nothing to like hold them up because we didn't have like
we didn't think it through
trellis. We didn't. I mean, we were so new at this version of gardening, so we really didn't know what to expect and whether or not it was going to work, and how big our plants would get. But they were really big, so they ended up leaning forward and leaning on the ground, and that wasn't ideal.
So
but
big.
I mean, they were fruitful. We had so many jalapenos and so many peppers. I was literally making fresh pico all the time. My family would come and pick, all types of tomatoes and peppers, and they'd be like, "Hey, can we go over?"
So we did 6 tomatoes and 6 peppers in this
and
one.
that was plenty. I have a large family, so it was plenty for them to go over and pick.
Yeah, well, one thing real quick before we get to the productivity. So the water is supplied, all of the water. It's only supplied by one pump. It's an aquarium pump. I got like a 90-gallon a minute, like aquarium pump. I dropped it in the far side. So the water's returning to the close side. The water's being pumped out of the far side. I did that so that it would circulate the water inside of the reservoir. And I just hooked it to a 1/2-inch piece of polytube, and then just hooked that 1/2-inch piece of polytube through a fitting into a 1/2-inch piece of PVC, ran it just straight across the top of the buckets, and then just went in there with the drill and popped 1/8-inch holes. So 2 1/8-inch holes per bucket. So they're just constantly spraying, a constant flow, 24/7, 365, spraying down inside that bucket, aimed it down directly at the roots, not across the top because it just splashes everywhere and it empties itself slowly, but just straight down into the plant. I found that way it's constantly being aerated by going through your substrate. It's keeping the roots constantly wet. It keeps the water moving inside of your bucket and constantly changing out. So it doesn't get stale. You don't end up with mosquitoes. You don't end up with everything else.
Yeah.
So it's constantly going in and it's constantly draining out of the bucket through that 4-inch pipe and returning back into your system. So the water is constantly fresh, constantly oxygenated, and it just works. And if the power ever goes out, you have a 1.5 gallon reservoir in the bottom. So you've got you've got air because you have the air gap. So you have plenty of water for a day or so until you can arrange something or just start watering by hand. It worked out really well. So let's talk about productivity. These got huge, as Vanessa was saying, just massive, huge, way bigger, way faster. We've never seen anything grow that fast. And we weren't even...
It kind of made me angry at all the time we spent with in-ground planting our tomatoes.
Tomatoes in the ground at the same time.
We've planted tomatoes in the ground, and they just weren't very fruitful. And no matter how many times you watered out, especially in the hot summer days, we'd be out there watering 3 times.
Well,
or we had an automated system always. Eric's always really good about automating everything. So that helped. But our water bill was high. We didn't see the plants as big as we'd liked, and there was a lot of pests that would eat
pests and bugs and slugs and snails.
It was bad. It was not a good experience. So we've now, ever since we've experienced this our own rendition of the Dutch bucket. I'm
going to call it the recirculating deep water culture Dutch bucket system.
See, I'm done.
Yeah.
Recirculating deep water culture. So
I don't know. There's too many letters.
RDW. Okay, I don't know. Anyway, but we'll never go back to in-ground tomatoes again. At least I don't think so.
No.
This is like my favorite form of gardening. I mean, we like gardening. Well, it depends. We might just get a little extra and like do a couple of extra rows of different variations of tomatoes or whatever and just kind of test it out. But it grows too well in the system to want to do it in ground again. And in ground, it's tough, So
the growth rate between the in-ground, because we planted we did these, small hydroponic setup, and then we did a regular garden. So we had our peppers and tomatoes like in the regular garden, and then we had
That's
the
right,
ones.
to the far right.
We had the ones on the far right, and we were like, we had already on like our 8th or 9th harvest of peppers and tomatoes before we saw the first flowers on the ones on the ground, and the ones on the ground were in super amended soil. I mean, we had compost and rabbit poo and like everything you could imagine in there, and they were doing great. We treated them for bugs, and we were babying them, and they were on an automatic sprinkler system,
there's just no comparing.
There's nothing in the soil to inhibit them because there's no soil with the hydroponic system. There's no pests to bother them. This is a hydroponic system. Everything in the hydroponic system is biologically available. So it's not like the plant had to work at all to like break down anything or digest anything. Everything was biologically available right from the start. All the plant had to do was slurp it up and rock and roll.
Wasn't there something that you would treat the water with as well, just to give the plants like extra nutrients?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can't just use regular water and expect everything to happen. So we used it's just tomato grow stuff. But basically it's fertilizer, Epsom salt, and calcium chloride. So it's calcium, Epsom salt, and it's a tomato. It's a tomato fertilizer, water soluble tomato fertilizer. You can buy it online. What this entire system, just look at hydroponic tomato fertilizer, because they sell it in bulk. Huh?
Okay.
Yeah, just look up hydroponic tomato fertilizer, and it'll pop right up, and we'll give you the actual name of it. And we'll put the link from Amazon.
Yeah. And we'll make sure that Eric adds the picture, the image of our system. That way you guys get a visual. Yeah. So it'll be on our little avatar page or whatever.
Yeah, well, it'll be the avatar for this guy right here. Oh, no. It was Master Blend. That's what it's called. Master Blend.
Oh, there it is.
Boom, right there. Yeah, we got. I think we only got like a 2-pound bag, right?
But we still have plenty.
The 2.5 pound kit right there, the $24 2.5 pound kit is all we got for an entire grow season, and that's here in Texas where we have a grow season is from like what, February to late February till Christmas. Yeah. So we only have like maybe 55 or 60 days where we don't grow vegetables. That 2.5 pounds lasted our system with 12 buckets the whole year. And then we still had plenty left over that we used to try to water our other plants with to see maybe it's the fertilizer. Let's put some on them and see what happens. Well, they liked it, but they didn't do anything magical to them. But yeah, it was so easy. Water just going constantly. All you got to do is top up that reservoir. Well, once a week, we would go ahead and add the master blend to it, and we do it. There's the instructions come with it, like, hey, is this the first time or just like a maintenance amount? And we'd always use the maintenance amount to fertilize with. But the stuff grew so fast, guys. Like, you could literally measure it day to day. Like the jalapenos we had jalapenos, Shinto, or the Shinto peppers,
oh, the peppers,
Japanese ones.
Those are good.
Good for salads. And then banana peppers, which was a mistake because those are already prolific, but you put them in hydroponics and you can't give them away. And then we had a bunch of different types of tomatoes.
Yeah.
And we didn't end up with any blossom end rot because of the calcium. We didn't end up with any problems at all. Absolutely no problems. We didn't have aphids because they're up off the ground. They're the whole system's 3 or so feet in the ground, up in the air, up off the ground. We didn't end up with we did have some tomato hornworm problems there in the beginning, but because it's not on the ground,
it wasn't that big of a problem.
And your plants are eye level with you, they're so easy to find. But when you're looking at our plants grew up over the trellis, which we made like maybe a 6-foot tall trellis, down the other side of the trellis, and then about 20 feet to the house, and then halfway up the side of the house.
I forgot you made a makeshift trellis after we saw how big they got.
Well, because they grew
the
so much faster than we thought they were going to grow.
Because if you let them hang down, they're just going to break off.
Yeah, you get a windstorm, and it just snap. They just snap because they get so much fruit on them that it's ridiculous. It's not exaggerating to say off of 6 pepper plants, we get a 5-gallon bucket of peppers every week. We got tired of pickling peppers,
that was easy.
giving peppers away.
If you do any pickling, like how quickly you could fill your shelves with pickled, veggies. So it got really tough. We still got jars full of the powdered peppers. Yeah.
We still got jars full of. We dehydrated them. We pickled them.
And this is friends and family coming over
and froze them.
Us giving them away.
Gave them away. People would try to leave. No, I still got peppers from last time. We're throwing bags in their car.
Take them. Take the pepper.
It's part of here. You have to.
Yeah.
You came and ate food at our house. You have to take peppers.
Anybody who's ever come over to our home has never left empty-handed.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
So things. And then the tomatoes did absolutely fantastic. We'll never have a dearth of tomatoes. All right. We love the tomatoes, but we'll never have so many that we're trying to give them away because we'll turn them into sauces and freeze dry them and dehydrate them and turn them into powders, which can be reconstituted.
Sun-dried tomatoes, all kinds of
sun-dried
stuff.
And can them. And everything, my wife's Hispanic. She uses a lot of tomatoes.
I use a lot of tomatoes. Video and sopitas and, just my rice, everything. I use tomatoes, pico de gallo. So it just worked out really well. So
if you had an overhead space where you could put some posts in the ground and have them be maybe 6 or 8 feet tall or probably 12 feet tall, and then you could put a pulley up at the top and a rope, and you could just clip your plant to it and slowly just raise it up until it can grow all the way to the top. And then let it double over and start growing back down. It would work out really well. I've seen a lot of hydroponic farms do it that way. It works great. I would, this next time when we do it, I'm going to just put double rows of the hydroponic system down, cattle panels, bend them in a U shape, but put them about, I'm tall. So maybe 4 feet, 5 feet up off the ground so that I can walk without bending over underneath them and then just pick all the fruit that grows. One thing I would advise against, guys, is we messed up when we did our first 2 tomatoes in the system. Tomatoes 1 in bucket 1 and 2 were an indeterminate variety, which means they just keep growing. And with all the nutrition that they got, they just kept growing. I think our vines ended up 60 feet or some stupid thing like that. They just kept growing all the way down, and then I just turn them around in the grass and have them start growing all the way back, and then just pick them up and pull all the tomatoes off and then put them back in the grass. I would not do an indeterminate variety. I would do a determinate variety. That way they get real big. They all flower at the same time. They put out a huge flush of tomatoes, and then you can just yank them out and throw them away and throw another one in there. Just because I know people are going to be like, but you could get a second flush. Why? It happens so quickly. If you feel bad for them, yank them out and throw them in the ground. They'll adapt just fine and maybe give you a few more tomatoes later on in the season. But if you're going for maximum tomatoes, I would let them get that first massive, massive flush and then yank them out and throw new ones in there because the rate that they grow is not exaggerating, at least a foot a week, 1.5 feet, 2 feet a week. It's really, really good. It's really, really great. I'd say that things that don't work, we tried a bunch of things. I tried to do a hydroponic, was it pumpkin? I wanted to make the world's biggest pumpkin.
Didn't work.
Now, why it didn't work, let's talk about that, is I didn't take a pumpkin start. I tried to use some rock wool and put some pumpkin seeds in it and sprout them and then put that inside of the system. And I think the little baby seedlings drowned.
Yeah, so
They
our
got
pumpkin
sprays of
experiment,
water on them and they didn't do well.
our pumpkin experiment will be TBD because we're definitely going to try it again.
I see so many people do so well.
we're gonna try it again, but this time we're gonna use a start.
Yeah, I see so many people do so well with them, and what they do is they do like we were talking earlier. You take your start, you throw it in a bucket of water. You don't want to try to break the dirt off of the roots out in the open because you're going to end up breaking a lot of the roots. So they just dunk it, in like witch trials in the water until all of the soil comes off the roots. Take the roots, pop them in the bucket, and then raise it up. Like I would hold the plant in place, like up to where it was even with the top of the bucket, and the roots would just spread out through the mesh, and then Vanessa would just pile in all of the hydrotron, and then we'd make sure she's nice and stable, and then rock and roll. But this system worked really, really startlingly well, and I don't know if it was just beginner's luck or beer that that helped me come up with this laziest possible aquaponic or hydroponic system. Now, I would love to see one of our listeners go out there and use this system as a aquaponic system. Get you an IBC tote, like a 275-gallon IBC tote, and just grow it exactly the same way, run it the same way, but have all your fish in the tote and just pump the water out into your plants. I think that would work out really well, too. The only thing you might have to add is a little bit of calcium, which you could probably get away with doing by adding some like crushed coral to the bottom of your fish tank, like your tote for your fish, just so the water is always picking up a little bit of that crushed coral.
I do want to try a couple of different things this time. I want to try cucumbers.
Oh, yeah. No,
just
that's
because they're just
a
lot of water. I mean, there's a lot of water.
Yeah, they're like
cucumbers, so I think
99% water. Yeah,
they would do really well. So definitely want to try cucumbers because I love pickling cucumbers and making pickles, turning them into pickles.
Our pickles are famous.
Yeah, they really are famous. We're known as the pickle people. But yeah, I want to get back into making some pickles, and then
There's an old joke.
What's the old joke?
You save a wee baby from a burning building. They don't call you the saving man. Yeah. You go out there and you pull the cow out of the ditch, and they don't call you the cow puller, but you're one goat. But
No.
well, it's about like the pickle people thing. It's like they don't call us for anything else. It's just the one thing that everybody can remember. That's where you get the pickles.
Yeah, it was like celebrity status pickle people, so it was pretty funny. And I also want to try strawberries. I want to. I'm convincing Eric here. I want one of those. I want some towers, some aeroponic towers, which we'll talk about later.
I haven't got any experience with those, but I look at them and I go, they should work.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know how they
see
would
people
work.
being very successful with their grows using those towers. So that's definitely a conversation for another day. But definitely looking forward to trying some strawberries in our hydroponic setup.
I'm gonna get rid of the F-bomb.
Yes, please.
What's that, like 4312?
Yeah.
Okay.
Eric behaves most of the time, guys, but I cannot.
I'm feral. That's where the feral part came from
Yeah.
in this podcast. Is it?
There's times where he slips up, and I cannot control it.
You're the one who found me as a stray and drugged me into this world.
What was I thinking? Just kidding.
But,
I knew exactly what I was thinking.
Doing your hydroponics strawberries. Hey guys, have you seen how they do those in gutters? So they take your gutters, they put them on sawhorses, right? And what they do is they take one gutter that's unmolested and they put it on across the top of a sawhorse so it's perfectly even with all the other gutters, right? And then they take a hole saw, usually like a 3-inch hole saw, and pop holes down about every 6 inches. I think most of them are 8 inches down some gutters that are like 12, 20 feet long. Have those on sawhorses so that you pump your water up into the top one and it goes across all of them, and then the water goes down those gutters, and those little holes you buy your 3-inch net pots and drop them in there. with a handful of hydrotron in your strawberry start. And so it's called, this system is going to be called like a nutrient film technique, NFT. Not to be confused with the cryptocurrency NFT. Yeah. But it's called nutrient film technique. It's just a little trickle of water that goes down there all the time. It's constantly going. And the plants just, get what they want from it. Very, very similar to how the feral hydroponic bucket system of doom works.
Is that what it is now? System of Doom.
Yeah.
It's going to be something different every
I
time.
don't know. I don't know. We haven't named it.
I also want to do basil. Thing about
basil's
growing
fast.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. So, you don't want to grow basil in a large garden bed because it's going to take over your garden bed. So you want to keep it contained and controlled. Unless you love pesto. I mean, that's a different thing. We love pesto and using basil for a lot.
The living crap out of pesto.
We would make for our farmers market. We would make fresh baguettes, and we would sell our pesto. And people just love dipping our warm baguettes into the pesto, and they said it was the best thing. And so we had a lot of clients request that. But I do want to grow basil in the hydroponic setup because it keeps it in a more controlled environment because it can get really hairy really fast. My mistake is that I was like, oh, I want to grow basil, and I got a little too excited and carried away, and we
ended up having to trim the basil with a hedge trimmer. We went literally to go harvest basil because these basil plants just in the ground, they got 10 feet tall if you left them alone, and we would just go and spread it like a sheet out, and then the hedge trimmer just and then harvest as much basil. Just rake it literally with just rake it off of the top of them on the thing. And then we'd go and sit down and listen to an audiobook and strip leaves for the next 4 hours.
Yeah. Well, actually, I found a trick to that, guys. So if you're listening, you're welcome. A colander, get a colander and pull the plant through the colander and it strips your leaves for you. Ta-da. You're welcome. It's great.
How come you never showed me that trick?
I did show you. Well, maybe because I wanted to keep you busy. Less talking, more action. I don't know.
I'm sitting over there
there's definitely a method to my
madness.
Just
totally zoning out. Pluck, 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 pluck.
Got you out of my hair for a little bit. That's all right.
I like the idea. It works great.
Yeah, it worked really
so
well.
if you're gonna do that, what I would do is I'd get some. I would go to what's it called? It's called well pipe. So you go to the your irrigation store and get the pieces of PVC that already have the 3-inch, the little 2-inch holes drilled in them already. So you have 2-inch holes drilled about every 6 or 8 inches down the entire length of a 4-inch piece of PVC.
It was just so much neater and standardized doing it that way versus us making the holes ourselves, because that would have been a horrendous mess. That probably would have taken more beers, but
So what you do there then, and now this, you don't need schedule 80 pipe. You need schedule 40. You don't need super thick stuff. It's not going to hold any pressure at all. So you're going to take and you're going to elevate your first one about 4 feet off the ground, and you're going to take that and put it at a very small angle, maybe a 3 to 5 degree angle. You're going to put it down a 90 and a 90. And then you're basically making a stair, back and forth, zigzag, the side of a mountain, down from the top all the way down to your bottom where it's going to go back into your reservoir. You're going to have one pump that's going to pump your water up into the top. And it's going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, all the way down to the bottom. And in that way, it's going to go through about, 110, 120 of the net pots of your basil or lettuce or whatever else you want to do this way. I would plant your basil seeds in rock wool, and I would just have them in the net pots already. I would just put them on a regular tray, mist them once a day in the rock wool, and then once they get little roots that are poking out of the end of the rock wool and in the little net bucket, take them out, plop them in your system, and promptly forget about them until it's time to harvest. I would not worry about with this system because it's going to be super, super fast to harvest. I wouldn't worry about trying to keep the plants alive. I wouldn't I see a lot of mistakes people do with hydroponics is that they get really attached to the plant and they want it to live for a long time. And it gets scragglier and scragglier over time. and eventually they've got this critter that's just putting out like the sharp, small, little mature leaves that aren't the big Genovese basil, wide leaves that you really, really want.
I love Genevieve's basil.
Oh, it's good stuff.
So amazing.
So you're going to want to let those plants get about 10 to 12 inches high, get like maybe their 10th to 12th set of leaves so they look like a little bush. Then just yank them out of your system and throw the next ones in.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys. And then just
your compost pile.
The rock wool
replant
was
them, whatever you
perfectly
wanna
fine.
do.
The rock wool is not actually made of rocks. Or it's made of minerals, spun minerals. But it breaks down just fine in your soil. It's not going to hurt your compost pile at all. It's already inundated with a ton of roots. So it's going to do amazing things for your garden. But I would just yank them and go. And doing it that way, you could probably have another fresh batch of basil every month, 200 plants, boom, 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 every month, running, probably 60 pounds of leaves every month. Easy, easy, easy. I would do my lettuces that way. I would do pretty much everything except for kale that way.
Yeah.
Or Swiss chard. I wouldn't do Swiss chard.
You could do kale and spinach too.
I like the kale when it gets big. Like
yeah,
a
that's
palm
true.
Tree.
That's true.
It's really cool.
I want to try blueberries though. Strawberries and blueberries for sure.
Blueberries do good in hydroponics.
Yeah,
I know
really
they need an acidic environment. I didn't know they would do. Well, let's do it.
Yeah, we'll
Right.
try it, and we'll definitely come back and let you know what the results are. So we'll definitely do that. But also too, having to clean out your garden beds and all that. That's a lot of work. And I'm not, of course, farming is work, but we're getting older, so the easier the better, right?
There's
and,
stuff you do in the ground.
There is stuff you do in the ground. You do your, and we'll get into that. Corn, all kinds of stuff, and that's a episode for another day or conversation for another day. But if it's easier, why not? If it's easier and it grows much better, why not?
Guys, it sounds like we're saying water every 15 minutes, right? Or every 5 minutes. I guess it sounds like it's using a lot of water. It's using so much less water than what the ground would use, because 100% of the water is going directly to the plants. Mm-hmm. Other than that, it's going back into a reservoir that has a lid on it to mitigate your evaporation. So more retention. When you're watering, most of your water isn't used by your plants. It goes back deep into the ground, which, it rains plenty, dude. You're not going to help the aquifer by watering your grass. It's all going back in the ground. It's going to weeds. It's going sideways this way and that. The rodents are drinking it, multiplying. In your hydroponics setup, it's only going to use up your targeted species of plant. So you're using such less water, like 1/1000, especially in the deserty kind of areas, 1,000th the water you would normally use on a major crop.
Okay, so let's talk about, I guess, placement, right? Because if I wanted to grow, my blueberries and strawberries, would it be wise to put those next to the peppers? Things like that. So what would you recommend?
Different times. Those are going to be a different time thing. And for some people, their growing season, they have actual growing seasons instead of just throw a dart at a board and call that the growing season.
Right.
You're not going to hurt anything by combining stuff.
Are my strawberries going to be spicy?
No. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That'd be kind of neat.
I'm sure
it's all Texas candy.
Yeah, everybody expects ooh, spicy strawberries.
Spicy.
Spicy.
That'd be pretty cool. But
yeah, right.
I just call it Texas candy.
Yeah.
Texas candy, spiciest jalapeno flavored strawberries around.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool, actually.
Strawberry jalapeno flavored ice cream.
I always worry about placement.
You're not going to really worry about anything. Now, tomatoes are super, and your peppers are going to be super heavy feeders. So
do they compete or take?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't. There's two different systems. I'd run your berries and stuff on a different system. They feed differently. They really start feeding a lot once they start actually fruiting. But until then, in their vegetative state, where they're just growing leaves and stuff, they're not really eating that much. Whereas your tomatoes are look at me, and they're constantly eating as much as they can get. They're very greedy. And you don't need as much space. If you do your strawberries in one of the killer bucket system type things, you're really wasting a lot of space there, because they don't really need that much. You could. That's why we were saying do them in gutters or do them in the PVC pipe itself, because they're not going to create this massive root system that your tomatoes and your peppers will do, right? So, yeah. Now, if you're going to do blueberries, by all means, do blueberries in a bucket, because they're a shrub and they're going to come back every year. But as far as man, that'd be interesting. Doing blueberries, and I'm wondering if you could, if they'd overwinter in there. That should
we'll find out. We'll find out, and we'll let you know.
Yeah, that should be pretty interesting. Root vegetables don't do well in hydroponics. I've seen people do it just to say they could in like a flood and drain system in a kiddie pool, but
I probably wouldn't want to try that.
Not so good. Anything that fruits above ground would be really, really well. Let's see some more interesting things that you could grow. Man, really almost everything. I wouldn't do corn. People have done corn in flood and drain systems, and sure, it worked. But why? When corn's perfectly happy to grow in the ground because it's just a modified grass from Peru. So, what else we got to cover here? Well, I know you need to do your news of the day. Let's take a break and do news.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to bring to your all's attention is El Nino is back, and it's set to bring extreme weather and new temperature records. So what does that mean for farmers? So for farmers, you're definitely concerned about, any threat to food production. So it can cause heavy rains, flooding, just extreme variations of weather, droughts, So one thing that I did want to give you some tips on as far as droughts or heat is concerned is if you are, like us here in Texas, where we experience really extreme heat, the lasagna method, for gardening. So if you guys aren't familiar with the lasagna method, it is a form of layer farming and gardening. So you would start with, so what you would do is you mow the area, right? And then you lay out your cardboard or newspaper. You'll pop a hole. You'll put your seed in or your starter plant in. You'll wet it down. And then you add the first layer of green, which is, your green layers are untreated grass clippings, compostable kitchen scraps, eggshells, coffee grounds, tea leaves or tea bags. Those are your green layers. So you'll add a green layer, then you'll pile on a brown layer, and a brown layer would consist of straw, hay, dead leaves, compost, cardboard and newspaper, peat moss, pine needles, sawdust. I mean, it doesn't have to be expensive or anything. It could even be yard waste, right? Those would be your brown layers. So it's a layer, it's a green layer, brown layer, and then you add one more of each. So then you do another round of green, another round of brown layer. You'll hose it down, and then you add your compost or mulch. And this would really retain the water around your plant. And it's just a better method overall when you're experiencing extreme heat in your area. So definitely consider the lasagna method if it's going to be super hot.
Yeah, you ever found a piece of cardboard or tin or something out and lifted it up off the ground and everything else around it's dry?
Yeah, and there's moisture
just moist underneath it. That's kind of what you're going for. Except that everything that Vanessa was talking about putting on top, it's going to break that cardboard down. Mm-hmm. Eventually, it's going to bring all, like, worms love to eat cardboard.
Yeah.
I think it's something in the glue. They love it.
But, and it's going to improve, like, all your poor quality soil. It's going to require less fertilizer or expensive soil amendments. And it's going to, creates loose, fluffy, fertile soil where plants will thrive. So it gives you a place to put your yard waste if you don't have a compost bin, and it's expensive, so it's definitely a great
I always tell everybody, if you can get away with it, don't use a compost bin. The reason everything becomes so much smaller in a compost bin is you're losing the nitrogen to atmospheric nitrogen. It's literally turning into air and going away. And your carbon is turning into CO2 and going away. It's being breathed out by the bacteria and stuff. It's going away. So what you're left with, sure, is basically the poop of a billion bacteria, but it's super good stuff. But it works a lot better if you can capture 100% of that and all those nutrients in the garden beds by burying it. I love slit trench like composting, where you dig a trench and you fill it full of your compost, and then you just throw a shovel full of dirt on that area. You keep that trench open, and then you got tomorrow you have another bucket of compost. You throw it in there, and then throw a bucket over it to keep the flies and bugs and stuff away. And you go down there until your entire trench is full, and then you just plant on top of it.
Yep,
it works out great. You capture 100% of that nutrition there in the soil.
What are your recommendations if some areas experience a lot of rain for El Nino?
Well,
I don't know if there's any. I mean, just think about what's going on in China with the wheat. Like, I don't know if there's any resolve to that.
I'm saying that now this is going to be slightly
Carol.
Yeah, this is coming from experience. The best way to make fluffy, fast, loose draining soil, and it's going to probably make some people angry, is add some molasses. Your sulfonated molasses, the dried molasses in particular, or any type of sugar you can to your soil. That's going to cause the bacteria to freaking explode. And what happens when they explode is they fluff your soil up like Downy. Like, they just, boom, fluff the soil up super great. One of the cool things, and I've shown people how to do this, is we go out there to an old, back where we're at, we'd go to a cotton field. And I'd take a handful of the stuff, put it in the ground, like a handful of the sulfonated molasses, put it in the ground, and then a handful, just leave the soil next to it alone, and then come back in a couple of days, and you'd be able to take your hand and push it all the way up to like your mid wrist into the area that you added the sugar, and the other area is still compacted soil. If you don't have the time to create any sort of drainage, you can kind of fake it by adding some sugar to your soil, fluffing it up real good so that it has more space, and maybe you can get through that deadpan hard stuff on the top of your soil, or your clay, fluff it up a bit so you can get to a sand layer that's underneath it and start draining back into your aquifer or drain that way. Other than that, guys, planting above ground in the bucket systems
would probably be best, right? For areas where you experience a lot of rain, where that El Nino is a concern this year, and it hasn't been a concern in the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty easy for us.
So yeah, so they're expecting record highs. Here in Texas, it's going to be it's already going to be estimated to be hotter than it was last year, and it's going to be it's going to be a record high, at least to be 5th or 6th place.
105, I think, by. Was it tomorrow?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I was telling my girlfriend, I was like, man, we haven't even peaked in Texas, and we're already feeling it pretty bad here. So it's going to get pretty gnarly here pretty soon. One
of the good things about the hydroponics is not only are you using less water, but your plants don't wilt.
Yeah.
During the middle of the day.
Really extreme hot.
They're constantly getting 100% of the water they need. They will drink more. And you have to check on your reservoir. Unless you put a flow valve in there and just hook it up to a garden hose or something like that, a water source, and so it's constantly filling itself. But I like to.
I didn't feel like that was necessary. For a home garden anyway. I didn't feel like that was necessary. It was just a matter of me going out every couple of days to fill up the tote.
And I liked being able to fill it up from scratch that way.
Yeah.
As well.
Kind of clean out.
Yeah, so that we could take it if we needed to and spray it out. Get any dead critters that might have fallen in there, even though we had a nice lid on it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we could actually track how much nutrition we were giving them. Instead of constantly diluting your nutrition by having a float valve on it, we could then go, all right, we're starting over from 0, and adding your nutrition to it. One thing I forgot to mention when we're talking about the setup of this is every one of those buckets, if you go through the on the Home Depot, has 1.5 gallons of water inside that bucket. You need to add that water, that dead space of water, to your total system volume. So if you have 12 buckets, right, you need to add those 18 gallons to your 50-gallon reservoir to come. Now you have to do the math to figure out dosing for 68 gallons to bring it up to the right nutritional profile. If not, if you only do it for your 50-gallon reservoir or 20-gallon or however many gallons you got, you're always going to be under adding nutrition. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I explain that
Yeah,
decently?
you explained it well.
Okay. Because I was like, man, what am I forgetting about that? And I was like, oh, yeah, the dead space, the water. It's not dead space. It's constantly getting, turned over like all the time, probably 3 or 4 dozen times a day. Water's getting replaced. And the movement in the water is what's really keeping down your mosquitoes, your bugs, your problems like that.
Yeah. And guys, just, I'm like a bugophobic, flyophobic. So if it's something that I feel is going to create, havoc and create more mosquitoes and larvae and all that crap, I'm not for it. So this was actually a very clean, very controlled setup. So I really enjoyed it, and it didn't bother me at all.
And we'll keep you guys in the loop. I think we're going to do one that's going to be the aquaculture kind of one where we'll grow shrimp or fish or something in one system, and we'll do one where we use the master blend and side by side them and see which one.
And we'll compare it.
Yeah.
We'll compare it, and we'll share the results with you guys.
Oh,
that
we'll
way,
we'll
give you a
follow
running
us on
start
social
to your
media,
project.
and you'll be able to see it all the time. See everything we're doing.
Yep.
We're going to really start posting a lot on social media as from here on out. As you'll see us at the building process on our house. You'll get to see, when we start breaking ground to clear picking areas for our garden.
Yeah, I want a
trees.
huge enclosed garden. We already have the blueprints. We already have the setup that we want. Eric here also, my husband is a jack of all trades, and I love it.
I can't weld.
Yeah, he can't weld, and he can't dance. He marches.
God,
he does not dance. It is terrible. And I'm Hispanic, and I love dancing, and I've tried.
I'm pretty
to
sure
show him.
my idea of dancing is a good Geneva convention.
It's definitely marching. It's not dancing. So
yeah,
it's kind of hilarious. I'm like, out of all the things you could do, you can't dance. So it's wild. But he can also construct things and like build things for me. And I want an enclosed garden because one of the issues that I had was pests, rodents, bunnies, especially those little cute cottontails cheese, as they would wreak havoc in my garden.
And
it was
the water lines.
And they would chew the water lines, and it was so deflating because you did all that hard work for these pests to come and eat it and chew them up, and it would get on my last nerve.
I remember one time
grackles were also an issue.
We before we had a cool planting machine, we were doing everything by hand at the last farm. And we did this like 150-foot row of pepper plants. And
if you guys have ever
and then we're doing 3
planted
plants across the top of the row because the rows were like 8 foot wide.
Yeah, it is not easy.
So 3 plants across the top of the row.
Very difficult.
150 feet long. We did several thousand pepper plants.
Hot sun,
crawling around,
sweating, getting
spikes,
dirty,
dirty, sunburn,
cursing each other,
being like,
loving
why
each
do you
other.
even love me? It's like, and then we get done and we proudly look up and we're like, the sun's about to set. And we're
fist
like,
pump. We did this.
We did it. Then we just limp back to the Kubota, get it, and then go home. And then come out the next morning and half the row was gone.
Half of it. Not even a joke.
Row, not even a joke. Like 1,500, 1,600 pepper plants. And these weren't little baby pepper plants. They were, like foot tall.
Very sad day.
Gone in one evening. They just started at the front and just mowed down the thing. We just looked really.
I never thought I'd despise cottontail as much as I did. I hated those little cute furry bastards.
For the cottontails,
it really did. I mean, I hated having to do it, but I needed to preserve my plants.
Right. You were smiling the entire time.
And I used them from the garden bed. So
yeah, we used them as fertilizer. Yeah, we definitely did.
But yeah, those are always you have to find a way to control that within your garden. And our
It
idea
wasn't like
is,
one or two rabbits.
yeah, no, it was.
We'd go out there and
crazy.
shine the spotlight.
I mean, this was a huge farm, guys, a huge ranch, like what, 96 miles.
It
So
was huge. So we shined the spotlight, and there was just like eyes as far as the eye could see of rabbits. And
Not
just like
cool.
just ears. Like it was a plague of rabbits.
Look at me, I'm getting PTSD.
Yeah, right. And we talked to the fish and game guys. We're like, what's going on? They're like, well, it's probably the worst year we've seen for rabbits in about 50 years. And we're like, oh, yeah, screw you guys.
Great, yeah.
Right? Yeah, you're trying to farm.
So our solution to that is
Lead.
enclosed.
Hot, fast. Yeah.
Enclosed garden.
garden.
Our enclosed garden. So we'll definitely share some pictures and some blueprints and some step-by-step, build of materials and all that with you guys.
We're not going to enclose the stuff that needs to go in the ground.
Right. That's
that'll be things like our major squashes, our pumpkins, our corn,
squash,
stuff like
pumpkin, corn.
That'll go in the ground, and we'll just have to
What
come up
else
with
do we grow in the rows back there? All types of variations of squash,
melons,
right?
Tons and tons of melons.
Yeah, melons. Oh God, I love melons.
Yeah.
Cantaloupe, watermelon,
all sorts of melons.
Honeydew.
I love collecting melons from around the world. And Baker's Creek.
Kajari.
Yeah, Baker's Creek.
Kajari melons.
Baker's Creek. We love you.
Baker's Creek sponsor us.
Anyway, they I love them. And I'm kind of like, I'm the guy who's like, ooh, melons talk dirty to me. You know, and I'm like, ooh, this one's different. That one's different. And so I buy like a package of everything and just start them. And then what's good is good. And we save it for the next year, save seeds for next year. If it sucks, we feed it to the critters. So, I mean,
there's never
chickens,
any waste. Yeah,
your chickens and your goats and your cattle, nobody's going to say no to a melon, even if it's not as sweet as you like it is. They're going to be happy as heck to have it. Your dogs even eat cantaloupes.
Mm-hmm.
That's what literally cantaloupe means, is dog melon. The Romans came up with cantaloupes to feed their dogs on their marches. That's why, that's where cantaloupe came from?
Yeah, you did tell me that. You told me that after our dog, Mo, went through the cantaloupe. And I was like, what is she doing?
Little 17-pound rat terrier ate the cantaloupe the size she was. And then promptly got like diabetic shock and passed out.
That was just...
She was well hydrated.
I just wasn't expecting it. So to hear that story, that was pretty interesting.
Yep. Science. So let's talk about
plants of the day.
Tree of the day first.
Tree of the day.
Tree of the day. I like this guy, right? This is the Dapple Dandy Pluot. It's pretty cool. Zones 5 through 9. Boom. It is fertile to itself.
Looks like a peach.
Yeah, but it's not. It's a plum and an apricot kind of
nice,
like mixed together. So, you can get 2 of them, and they're happy to go. They're happy to make fruit. You can get them with another different type of plum, and they make fruit. So it says it's a heavy producer of colorful, interesting fruits. The Dapple Dandy Pluot tree is a new and distinct variety of interspecific plums. This hybrid fruit are referred to as dinosaur eggs due to the pale green and yellow coloring with red molting. The flesh is a creamy pink color with a spicy plum apricot flavor and a nice acid sugar balance. The large clingstone fruit. You know what clingstone means?
No.
What do you think it means?
Cling. Stones that cling together?
Yeah, well, it's not holding on to rocks. So stone fruits are called stone fruits because they have that big old seed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a free stone, that means when you cut it apart or tear it apart, the seed just drops out on the ground. If it's a clingstone, it's the one where you have to cut the seed out because it holds on to the seed. Like it get all fiber next to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Right. Anyway, this is just side conversation. The large clingstone fruit ripens in July, the perfect time for a juicy summer snack. Dapple Dandy Pluots are wonderful when eaten fresh, but are versatile enough to make into jams, pies, and additional to salad. The Pluots have great storage qualities as well. It says the vigorous upright tree needs 400 to 500 chill hours. You can basically ignore chill hours.
You had me at jams and pies.
Well, I want to make wine out of it.
Ooh. Now you have me on wine.
A plummy apricot wine? Yeah, what?
Yeah. It
says it's a super heavy producer, works out really well, which I found with things that are super heavy producers is that I do not want them to produce fruit their first year. And so I will go when they put the first year that they're in the ground, that next spring, right? So you plant your stuff in the fall. The next spring, it's going to try to put out flowers. I go and rub all the flowers off. I watch it put 100% of its focus into getting bigger and getting a bigger root system. Now, the second year, I don't care what it does. But that first year, I don't want them to make any fruit because I want them to be, they're coming out of transplant shock. You basically cut off half their legs. You know, you want them to kind of spend their time getting better and better and happier. So that was our tree of the day. Our fruit. Well, our plant of the day is the Heritage Red Raspberry plant. Now, this is the old-timey original raspberry that you would probably see around, pretty much everywhere. And I don't know how they are out here in this part of the West, but like, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, along the Oregon Trail area, this is the raspberry that came with them, right? It's great for zones 4 through 8. You can kind of ignore that. It'll do whatever it wants. Super adaptable.
Shout out to Stark Bros.
Stark Bros.
Sponsor us, Stark Bros.
Sponsor us. We buy so much stuff from you. It's ridiculous. So we had one growing up. And what started off, the neighbor had one. And we had a chain link fence between the two of us. And so it would grow up and it would grow like canes through the chain link fence. And we'd harvest it. The guy got tired of dealing with it because these guys will constantly spread. They'll become bigger and bigger.
Were they really sweet?
Yes.
My problem with raspberries is that they're pretty tart as far as like the ones that we've tried growing out here.
These are pretty sweet.
Okay.
They were, it would keep spreading and spreading and spreading. So he got tired of it and mowed it down a bunch of times. Well, by that time, they already kind of spread on our side. And then my mom named it Esmeralda. And we had Esmeralda, the raspberry plant, my whole childhood.
Oh, nice.
Like my whole childhood. Like we ate so many raspberries. We never did it. My I can't remember my mom ever doing anything with them because I don't think we ever got. They made it inside. Like we just go outside and just munch. I ate so many raspberry plants. I probably could still find some raspberry seeds in me somewhere. So this is a huge, ever-bearing red raspberry. It is a favorite for its flavor, firmness, and fruit size. This variety produces abundant crops of large, sweet, dark red raspberries are perfect for eating fresh, canning, freezing, and making jams, jellies. This self-supporting, upright canes are hardy enough to grow in poor soil but require a well-draining site. The bush has 2 harvest seasons, with a moderate July yield in July and a heavy yield in September until frost, making them ever-bearing. Floricane berries ripen in July, and primocane berries ripen in September through frost. Red Heritage is cold-hardy and self-pollinating. It's a licensed variety from Cornell University. Yeah, whatever. It's the original. Do you know what floricane and primocane mean?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So floricane means that year's growth. That first year's growth is going to come up and flower on that year's first growth. So that the stuff that just grows like that year. Primocane is stuff that's 1 year old. Okay? So if it's 1 year old growth and they have usually a lot of blackberries, a lot of stuff is primocane because it gets the berries get bigger because they're growing from already established things, right? Make sense?
Yeah.
So a little side note is do not plant red, gold, or purple raspberries within 750 to 100 feet of blackberries. Black raspberries. So black raspberries may be more susceptible to viral diseases carried by aphids and from nearby raspberry plants. So black raspberries are kind of they're delicate. I'm not a huge. I've tried them, but it's kind of like, why would I want a black raspberry that looks like a blackberry but tastes like half the size of a blackberry, but tastes like a raspberry? So I've never enjoyed black raspberries, but this is saying that black raspberries' immune system sucks, and then these will kill it. So after planting, be sure to prune the bare root canes back to about 2 inches above the ground. Don't skip this step, blah, blah, blah. And then they just grow. I have never had a problem growing raspberries. I've had a problem keeping raspberries in one spot. But actually, growing raspberries has never been a problem. If you're going to want to keep your raspberries in a specific place, I suggest you use an edging type material. You dig down and you put at least a 4 or maybe even a 6-inch deep edging all the way around the area you want to keep your raspberries. Raspberries, just like we have the blackberries right now out front in buckets, they do great in buckets. We collected a bunch of blackberry plants for the new farm over the last year and a half, and just have them growing out front in buckets, ready to go back in the ground. And so we can divide them up and then put them into the ground. We'll just let them go crazy, just populate the buckets as much as they want.
Yep.
But yeah, blackberries and raspberries. Remember the old farm where the blackberries would come up in the middle of the the walkways?
Yeah.
And that was even through that 2-inch edging. You got to have a 4 or 6-inch edging. But
What was it, the blackberries or the
yeah,
raspberries
those
that were prickly?
Those now both of them can be prickly. This heritage one is going to be prickly. But you have thornless blackberries are a thing, and thornless raspberries are a thing. So if you're gonna get
10 out of 10, probably recommend if you have small children that you want picking off the plants, definitely get thornless.
Yeah. Arapaho is a really common thornless blackberry that's real big, produces the big thumb-sized blackberries. They're real great. Get whatever's going to suit you. If you have a bunch of deer problems, the thorned ones, they're going to help kind of fend them off a bit. If you don't, because you're putting up fences, electric fences and whatnot, then your thornless are going to be just fine. I think that just about does it. What else you got for today? We've covered your news. We covered your everything else.
Yep.
Right? Well, guys, thank you for listening. It's been a lot of fun. We're super excited about starting this new journey with dragging you all with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. Closing day was today. Super pumped. Been pumped all day, running around cloud nine.
So many emotions. It was like a roller coaster, but we finally made it.
Yeah.
And we're very happy. And now I'm just exhausted. It was just a lot of emotion.
Yeah. Definitely going to relax here for the rest of the evening. But you can go ahead and find us on social media. It's going to be This Pharaoh Life. You'll see our little logo on there, the little coyote guy. You can go ahead and send us an email if you'd like to talk about the show, come on the show as a special guest, or you just have any questions, comments, concerns, you can go to thispharaohlifepodcast@gmail.com. We'd appreciate it if you check out the Etsy. We're always adding stuff to the Etsy, adding new different things. We'll add a whole bunch of cool stuff as time goes on, from more farm related and more direct apparel related, and some insider jokes. That'll be thispharaohlife.etsy.com. And you have the Instagram, right? And that is This Pharaoh Life.
Instagram is This Pharaoh Life, and so is so is TikTok.
TikTok. Yeah, we have a TikTok.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about the top ticker.
Yeah. So you'll see more videos on TikTok as we start our actual farm and we're able to do things, grow things, make products out of them. We'll be able to show you step by step on, how to do various things. So super excited about that.
We have the YouTube too.
And we have a YouTube channel now.
Yeah, This Pharaoh Life on the YouTube. And all it is a bunch of podcasts.
Yeah.
The podcasts are available on YouTube if you just want to listen to them on that way. There will be eventually videos on there. I don't like to be on screen. You don't like to be on screen.
No.
Tinius doesn't care. Mobits, the dog, doesn't care. But it'll mostly be just us talking.
Or wearing a GoPro and showing you how to do things. So.
Oh, yeah, we could do that.
Totally.
But all right, guys, thank you for listening, and we appreciate you. Appreciate all of our listeners out there. Canada's been picking up a bunch.
Say something nice.
Oh, say something nice.
We always do the say something nice.
All right, I'll start this time.
You'll start.
Because my usually sucks, and yours is usually way better. Guys, sometimes it just helps to let things that are out of your control, go and just relax. You can't control everything. And this entire home buying process has really ground that into us. Is that we couldn't control everything that was going on despite our best efforts. And it just came to the point where we were like, screw it, it's either going to happen or not.
Yeah.
And we started even actually looking at other properties.
You can't control anything. You can only control your reaction to things.
Yeah. And it just boom. Like
You
within
know?
like, it was like one email. They were just like,
Yeah.
surprise, you're closing tomorrow.
Yeah, it was literally a phone call that I was not expecting or anticipating.
They're like
They're
7
hey, are
p.m.
you
the night
available?
before.
And,
Yeah.
tomorrow to close, and it was just caught me off guard and really happy. I just didn't. I was in a state of shock. I didn't even know how to. It took me a while to process it. I think, but yeah.
So not everything is in your hands, but everything generally works out in your favor if you have faith.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean faith in a higher being. You can be. It just means faith in the good that is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like manifest that stuff.
Yeah. And I guess mine would be on that vein too, is that, if it's meant for you, it's going to happen. Things are going to work out like butter. If you're trying to fit
this was shitty butter.
Yeah. This was, if you're trying
lumpy
to
yak
fit,
butter.
if you're just trying to force something to happen and force something or force somebody to see your value or just force things in general, like it's just not meant for you. Just let it go. Let it go, and you'll see what doors open up for you and who really appreciates you and values you and wants to take care of you and really help you evolve. So
I think you can apply that to your personal relationships with people
Yeah.
as well. Like, don't try to force things if they're not going to happen with like some new friend or something like that. Then let it go.
Yeah. So just be sweet. Just be sweet. Enjoy the ride and don't force things. Let them happen the way they should. Because I'm a big believer in our path is already written. Yes, you can control it and kind of, it can waver depending on what you do, but it's already written.
There is no way you hippie believe in that, because up until you kidnapped me, you were just a city girl. And you were like, city girl, city life.
Oh yeah,
over here.
I never. If you would have asked me what tiniest is, she's 4. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, if you would have told me,
it was like 6
5
or 7 years.
oh yeah,
ago.
6 years ago. If you would have told me 6 years ago that I was going to be, on a podcast, that I was going to have a podcast, that I was going to be all about self-sustaining, that I was going to be starting a farm, that I was going to be buying a farm, that my husband was going to be a farmer, I would have laughed at you. I literally legit would have laughed at you. I thought that, the city life and the, having the best of the best was where it was at and what, being all bougie and all that, that made you who you are, but it's not. It really isn't. Because at the end of the day, like, what do you have to show?
On that note, don't be afraid to date outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. I would have never met my husband had I not taken a chance in dating outside. I just got so burned out with dating the same old and same old sob story. And so I took a chance, and I took a chance on my husband, and it's the best thing that I could have ever done. We have our daughter, we have a beautiful life together, we're thriving. And the best is yet to come. Like, this is only the beginning. So I'm really excited to see what's going to unravel here.
It's going to be a lot of fun, guys. We very much appreciate you guys.
Love our listeners.
Oh, love you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, who's listening?
Canada has been picking up quite a bit.
Sweet.
Yeah, picking up a bunch out of Canada.
Nice. Okay.
You Canuckistanis, y'all on fire, and we're sorry. Pray for you. I will drink this beer right here for all of our fiery Canuckistanis.
Take care. Be safe, guys.
All right. Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.